Welcome to Programme 2 in the BIS Group British Speed Chess Championships from the Park Lane Hotel here in London. For those of you who missed last week's programme, let me just explain that this is a sudden death knockout championship, and the rules are that the players have 25 minutes in which to complete their moves. We're all ready for the second quarter-final then, which features Susan Arkell, who plays white, and Igor Ivanov. Susan, let me tell you, prevailed by beating her deadliest rival, Jana Miles, the British women's #1, after a draw and a quick play. Ivanov, who's the only qualifier from the preliminary rounds, eliminated the under-20 world champion, Viswanathan Anand. Those preliminary rounds were also played here at the Park Lane Hotel and attracted over 100 leading British and Commonwealth competitors, fiercely contesting the 4 open places available in the first round of this championship. Well, today's arbiter, Louise MacDonald, is ready to hit that little button on the clock, and waiting to describe the play is our commentator, Ray Keene, assisted by John Nunn.
Susan Arkell playing white, plays the King's Pawn opening, and Igor Ivanov, hardly surprisingly, to the Sicilian defence. And what Susan's doing is playing perhaps a slightly unusual variation, hoping perhaps for an equal position where Ivanov might overpress his hand. Now Susan has the chance here to push on her pawn on e4 to the e5 square, going into a French defence, but she prefers to exchange. Quite consistent with the policy of maintaining a level position. Out comes the white bishop. John, you play the Sicilian defence a lot. When you face things like this, where white's just trying to maintain the balance, what do you do?
I think what Ivanov's done is very sensible. By pushing on his c-pawn, he's managed to create an asymmetrical pawn structure in which both sides can play for the win. Obviously, what he wants to do is to unbalance the position and try to make it more complicated.
Yes, of course, Ivanov is the favoured player in this game. He's playing with black, which is a disadvantage, and of course he's got to try and unbalance things. But Susan's got a very, very solid position. She's developing her pieces sensibly. She has no obvious weaknesses, and in fact the black pawn on d5, an isolated pawn, might turn out to be a weakness in the black camp. Modest developing move by Susan, and Igor castles his king into safety. I feel that bishop on e3 is perhaps exposed to an attack by knight g4 by black, and I've got feelings that Igor, yes, Susan's castled, that Igor is going to try and line up his pieces against that white king on the king side.
Yes, Ray, I think white's main active plan here is to push forward the c-pawn to c4 and then possibly even to c5 to try and gain space on the queen side.
Yeah, Susan may do that. A little defensive move by Igor, stopping a white bishop or knight going to the g5 square. I have the feeling that the way Susan is building up this position, she may well not push her c-pawn for a while. I think she's more concerned with getting her pieces out rather than starting any sort of counter-attack. But maybe wrong. Let's see. No, you're right, John. She's pushed on the c-pawn. She's trying to get some activity going on the queen side.
This also enables her to bring the queen's knight out to a more active square at c3.
That's right. Out comes Igor's knight to the best square. Well, John, do you think Susan should push on her c-pawn to c5 or just maintain the tension?
I think she should develop the queen's... Yes, she's moved the queen's
she's
knight.
Done that. That's a good move.
Then possibly c5, followed possibly by b4 and b5 after suitable preparation, perhaps with the idea of creating a passed pawn ultimately.
Yes. Yes, if Susan works well on the queen side, she can get something going there. But of course, she's going to have to watch out on the other side of the board. I'm absolutely convinced that Igor's going to be eyeing her king in the not-too-distant future. Igor's a very aggressive player, and I think he wants to use those 2 bishops of his lined up against the white king and try some sort of attack there. That rook move is a preparation, putting a little bit of pressure against the white bishop on e3. Some people, John, might be tempted here to take on the d5 square. They might be tempted to play pawn on c4, takes the white pawn on d5, but I don't think that's advisable, do you?
No, certainly not, because black would just move the knight away, probably to b4.
Well, sorry I spoke. Susan has in fact taken the pawn on d5. I must admit that is not something I would have done.
No, I think that in the long run, the pawn on d5 is going to drop off, and then white's just going to be left with an isolated d-pawn herself.
Yes, I find that decision remarkable. And unless something very strange happens, black is going to win that pawn back. And out comes Igor's knight. It's a very good, aggressive square for the knight, and he's threatening to take back the white pawn on d5. So I think it's safe in saying we both condemn the move c4 takes d5, right, John?
That's right. It's strange that Susan played this move quickly, and now she's thinking a long time after what was virtually a forced reply.
Yes. Yes, I think she previously overestimated her capacity to win the pawn back. Well, it's an interesting move. The bishop attacks the black rook on e8. But I fear it's only a temporary measure. I think in the long run she's not going to be able to hold that pawn. And I think Igor's got a number of good replies here. He could either just play bishop from c8 to d7, or he could even consider playing rook e7. I think it depends what kind of middle game he wants. If he wants something that's simple, yes, he's played bishop d7. He's just going for a small, safe advantage.
Probably white's best chance here is to take on d7 and then play knight e5 with the hope of exchanging a lot of pieces off.
Yes, that would be admitting immediately that she can't hold the pawn. But of course Igor might not want to take the pawn back immediately anyway. Well, she's adopted John Nunn's idea of playing the knight to e5, but in a rather different move order. It's an interesting idea. We expected her to take on d7 first and then play the knight to e5, but Susan's jumped in at once with knight e5. I can't help feeling this is somewhat less forcing than the variation we had in mind.
Yes.
She's not going to gain a tempo against the black queen, and also she's going to have her own queen's knight wandering around the board if black takes on b5.
On the other hand, the knight arriving on b5 would attack a7, so there's a possibility to gain time there.
Yes. Well, I think Susan's strategy is clear, and her opening has misfired a bit, and I think she's hoping that while she's a pawn up, she can give back that pawn and perhaps clear off all the pawns from the centre and the queen side, and perhaps reach a drawish position. Certainly I don't think she's got much chance of winning from a situation like this.
It seems to me, Ray, that Igor Ivanov has a remarkably relaxed pose at the board.
Yes, he's a very philosophical player. Many Russians are. Take life as it comes. Maybe Igor's strength. He qualified from the Open tournament. He lost his first game in the first round of that, and ever since then he's done nothing but win. So he has something to be relaxed about. Of course, Igor, the Canadian champion, came over this summer to play in the British Championship, where he shared the second prize. And perhaps Igor's main claim to fame is that in the year before he left the USSR, he beat Karpov, who was then world champion, in a very interesting game. So he's certainly a player to be watched, very inventive, resourceful player. Perhaps a potential winner, John?
It's possible, yes. Referring to that Karpov game, I understand that Ivanov's business cards have the final position of his game against Karpov printed on them.
I didn't know that. Anyway, Igor's thinking here. Susan's last move caused a few puzzles. He's taken the bishop. White takes back. Well, there's a case here for just playing knight on b4 takes the pawn on d5. And black's pawn on a7 is attacked, but black still is ganging up on the white knight on e5. Yes, Igor's just taken the pawn back. But of course, if Susan takes that pawn on a7, John, don't you think there's a danger she might get a piece trap there, or do you think she can save it by tactical methods?
I think if she's going to take it, she has to take it with the knight. I'm sure that take it with the rook would lose a piece in a few moves, but I can't immediately see a refutation of taking it with the knight.
No, and if for example now, white played knight on b5 takes the pawn on a7, and black tried to trap the knight, perhaps by queen to b6, then white could play knight c4, which would cause all sorts of problems. But I suspect that if white plays knight takes a7, black can just take on e5. Well, anyway, Susan decided not to do it. She simply swapped off the black bishop. But looking at the position now, white's knight on e5 is well placed, but the bishop on e3 is not. It's really just a superior pawn. White's pawn on d4 is isolated and blockaded by a black knight, which is really an ideal situation for black. But I think that perhaps the crucial thing is on the queen's flank, the left-hand side. Black's got 2 pawns on a7 and b7 against white's 1, the pawn on b3. And as we all know in chess, when a pawn advances towards the back rank of the opponent, it becomes a queen. And black has the chance here, not immediately, but gradually, to advance those 2 pawns against the white 1 and create what's known as a passed pawn, a pawn that has no opposition, that can push on and press to become a queen. And I think that's where the long-term strategic probabilities lie for black.
The main question is whether or not black should start this plan immediately by playing, for example, a5, or whether he has some useful preparatory manoeuvres to play first.
Yes. Well, one thing black might do is perhaps put the pawn on a6 rather than a5 just to defend it, and then mass his rooks on the open c file. It's an exchange of all the rooks wouldn't necessarily be to black's disadvantage. And if Susan wants to do anything in this game, she may have to take desperate measures like advancing her kingside pawns. Perhaps play g4 and h4. Yes, Igor's played a6. I said if Susan wants to get some action going, she may have to play something like g4 and h4, but that's not really in her style. Susan, I've never played Susan. Have you played Susan, John?
No, I haven't.
I've never played her, but I've seen a few of her games, and it seems to me that she's a very cautious player, and that when she does beat a strong opponent, it's because she tempts him to overreach. And I don't really think it's in her character to lash out with a move here like g4. I know some people who would. You might, John.
Well, I think it's a pretty desperate measure, to
It
be
is a
honest.
bit desperate, but I've seen the odd game where you've played g4. No, Susan's occupying the open file, and that's much more in her style. I suspect Igor now will also put a rook on the c file, as black does not object to an exchange of all the rooks.
Perhaps white would answer this with rook c4.
Yes, trying to create a safe post for the rook on the c file. Yes, there goes the black rook to the c file. And now Susan has to decide: will she play rook c4, trade rooks, or just leave the situation as it stands? And a useful little move here might be h3, creating what's called Luft. Luft is the German word meaning air, and it's a little precaution people often take to avoid getting mated on the back rank. So many games between inexperienced players end when a rook or a queen comes swooping down to the back rank and traps the opponent's king. And a little safety precaution like pawn h2 to h3 here would rule out that eventuality in the future. So I think Susan's got a couple of reasonable moves here. One is rook c4, as John suggests. Another one is h3. Rook c4, yeah, that's probably the best move. And now the move b7 to b5 must be considered, attacking the rook. And of course remember that the black queen on d6 defends sideways the black pawn on a6. So b5 is a safe move, which prods the white rook away. What do you think about b5, John? Is it a good possibility?
It has the slight defect of leaving the a-pawn backwards. I mean, white might, for example, be able to exchange rooks and then play the manoeuvre knight d3 to c5 in order to attack the weak a-pawn.
Yes, perhaps. But Igor's got to do something, and if he does nothing... No, he's played b5. I thought he would.
Can I suggest an interesting possibility here, and that's to play rook takes c8, rook takes c8, bishop takes h6 and queen g3 check.
Well, that's amazing. It's the kind of tactical resource we expect from John Nunn, and Susan hasn't played it. I don't think we can really go into it now because the position has changed, but I'm sure after the game, John will be down there demonstrating this possibility to a couple of bemused players.
Yes, it would have forced a draw, in fact.
That is a strange move. That is a very strange move by Igor. He's pushed on his potential passed pawn, where it can be taken by the white rook. But I imagine it's too dangerous for white to do this. This is a situation where creating luft might have been a sensible idea earlier on, because now black is playing with thoughts of trying to mate the white king on the back rank if that pawn is taken. So, Joe, what happens if white takes the pawn?
I'm still working on it. But I think I see now that black exchanges on c1 and then plays queen b4, forking the rook on a5 and a mate on e1.
Yes, that's exactly what I was saying before about the back rank checkmating possibilities. And what if white were to take on c8 first and then play rook takes a5?
Well, the good thing about commentating rather than playing the game is that you can wait and see what happens.
Yes. Susan hasn't done it. She's simply moved her queen to the edge of the board, attacking the black rook twice.
It seems to me that Susan's played this game in a rather passive frame of mind. She's avoided all challenges to black.
Yes, it's the way... In chess, of course, white has the advantage, because white moves first. And there are so many ways for the white player to play for a draw using this advantage of the first move, which is rather like the serve in tennis. Yes, Igor swapped rooks, giving check to the white king, and white takes back. And it's a big problem for strong players playing black against a slightly weaker opponent with white. What to do if that player plays for a draw?
White's main problem is that none of her pieces are really able to help in the fight against the a-pawn. The queen's stranded on the opposite side of the board, and the bishop and knight, although quite good if white were playing on the king's side, can't do any active play at all on the other side of the board.
Maybe it's time to try your sacrifice here. Does it work now? Bishop takes h6? And I know it's difficult for people to follow this on the board, but let's take a look. White plays bishop on e3, takes the pawn on h6. Black takes back, pawn on g7, takes on h6, and then white plays queen on h3 to g3 check. And that's the start of the combination. And it's all based on wherever the black king goes. If the black king were to go to the f8 or h8 squares after that queen check, white could move the knight from e5 to g6 check, followed by queen takes queen. It's very hard to see. It's a very deep combination. It's the kind of combination that really only strong, experienced players can spot. But it is crucial to Susan's defence in this game. And it's been hanging around for so long, it's been sort of lying below the surface. But Igor's really forced her hand now. He's got so many threats on that queen side with that passed pawn. But if she doesn't do something like this, she's really inevitably going to go under. Well, she's taken the pawn. That's the first stage. And now really, the time has come, Susan, when bishop takes h6 must be played. Otherwise, there's no real defence to that black passed pawn on a4. No, she has not done it. In fact, she's not just not done it, she's stopped herself from doing the next move as well. And this move actually takes away the chance of playing the sacrifice in the future, doesn't it, John?
It does, yes. I'm not at all clear what the idea of this queen move is. It doesn't seem to do anything to stop black advancing the a-pawn.
No. No, I think we agree that this is a very bad move, queen f5. It really doesn't meet the needs of the position at all. Of course, one of the most annoying things in chess is to play a move, and the minute you've taken your hand off the piece, realise suddenly what you could have played the move before. And if Susan's now seen bishop takes h6, she must be kicking herself under the table. And Igor's pawn goes on. The sword of Damocles hanging over white's head. Well, a few moves ago, John, I said g4 in semi-desperation. Would you think about g4 now? I mean, has time come for something really...
Not at all. I think the only thing white can do now is to just defend passively and bring her pieces back to try and stop the a-pawn. I'm sure g4 would only accelerate the end.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. What she could do perhaps is play the queen back from f5 to b1 and just try and man all hands at the pump to stop the black a-pawn from queening. But it's a miserable existence. Not something I'd like to recommend. No, she's played g4. White's idea to follow up this attack is to play the pawn from h2 to h4, supporting a thrust pawn g4 to g5. That would hit the black knight, and then white could break through to the f7 square. But this can't possibly work. There isn't enough time for it. And even if black just plays his pawn from a3 to a2, there's bound to be some counterattack on the other side of the board that's going to just wipe out this idea. And Igor pushes on his pawn. And one major threat now must be to play the queen from d6 to a3, threatening to push on the pawn, veiled designs against the white rook on c1 and the white bishop on e3. And this is looking really horrible. I don't think that helps at all. I mean, if Susan is going to use those kingside pawns, it had to be via h4. I mean, just playing g5 is so easy to meet. Knight takes e3, yes. Attacking the white queen, she must recapture.
Now queen a3, Ray.
Queen a3 certainly worth a try. And Igor has played queen a3. The white rook is attacked. Black threatens a2 to a1, becoming a queen, and queen takes e3 check is a threat. And the white threat of g5 takes f6 is really not relevant in this situation. White's position has utterly collapsed. Igor has plenty of time left. That's his clock on the right there. He could easily wrap up this game in a quarter of that time. Oh, John, don't forget that in the earlier round, Susan did beat Jana Miles from a position that looked even perhaps worse than this.
It's difficult to do that sort of thing twice.
Yes, and also Igor is a much more experienced player than Jana Miles. And I can't see this game going on much longer. Rook into the corner, stopping the pawn, but that does not meet the other threat. Queen takes pawn on e3 check. One pawn down, more to go. King moves out of check. Igor now has many ways to win. Very simply, he could play pawn on h6, takes the white pawn on g5. Another move is queen on e3, takes the pawn on d4. Queen takes d4.
The point here is that rook takes a2 is met by queen d5 check.
Yes, of course. Well, Susan's position is not just desperate, but her clock time is slowly ticking away. She's down to about 4 minutes now. Susan's taken the pawn, but now queen d5 check must surely win. Queen d5 check, yes. Almost all the white pieces are dropping off. King moves. Igor has a choice now.
I would guess that rook takes e5 is the simplest way here, Ray.
Yes. And Igor has played rook takes e5. Queen c2. This does not help.
It allows mate in 2, in fact.
Queen f3 check. And mate next move. Susan plays on. And one of the many ways. Pawn takes pawn, mate. Igor Ivanov has won.
So if the two players would like to come over and have a chat, bang go the hopes of British women in this championship at least. Susan was the last representative. If you'd like to come over here, Susan, and you, Igor, tell me, did the pressure get to you out there?
It's not very pleasant sitting in front of all those people.
Are you aware of the audience?
Yeah, and the lights are very hot.
Commiserations anyway. Igor, congratulations to you.
Thank
You've
you.
already got joint second in the British Championships this
Yeah,
year.
I
You
did.
seem to be on a winning streak. Can you go all the way in this one?
Yeah, I will try.
You think you can, do you?
Well, of course, I think so. I don't know if I will, but I will try at least.
Do you like the atmosphere of speed chess, do you?
Yes. Yes, I like very much.
Right, well, thank you very much. As Igor goes into the hat then for the semi-final draw along with John Nunn, it's time to say goodbye from the BIS Group British Speed Chess Championships for this week. Join us for the third quarter-final next week, which will feature Julian Hodgson and Glenn Flair.